Welcome into another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. We've got a men's basketball team we'll get to in a bit, Jack, that's going to contend for a national title. They're making some waves nationally.
Did you see John Rothstein's tweet?
No.
He said, Final Four, Baylor, Gonzaga, blank and blank.
Oh, yeah.
So essentially, he said JMU is in the Final Four. So I didn't say it. I just tweeted it.
You did say it. You did tweet it. You put it out there.
I did.
With UVA as well. So I don't necessarily see that being the Final Four, but it certainly got a chance to be. I think Gonzaga is going to have to rally in the tournament to actually get there. I think JMU is certainly at this point a lock. You can pretty much Sharpie them in. Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. Travis Ford talked about this, the St. Louis head coach. He talked about it on Inside College Basketball on CBS Sports Network. Plug. But he talked about how the postseason conference tournaments, like, we don't really know if they're going to happen. These automatic bids might be the regular season champions. And JMU men's basketball has set themselves up to be in the running as of the first 4 games to get that automatic bid if it's just the regular season. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think mid-majors like JMU that play the conference tournament early enough will avoid conference tournament games. So I think like a Power 5 teams might opt out, but I think JMU is going to end up playing. But I mean, there's certainly a possibility some of these mid-majors do opt out, but I still think they'll try to give it a go. That's just my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. JMU, though, last time they were 3-1 to start conference play. They didn't have the strongest finish, but they did start 3-1 in conference play back in 2016-17. So
I didn't realize that.
Road did do it.
I did not realize that. I remember they had a strong start one year. I didn't realize it was actually 3-1 in his first year as the coach, and then they were 7-11.
Yeah, it was technically a 3-0 start.
Yeah, so what they go over the last 4-11 to finish.
That sounds, and that I think that was the season that gave us hope for the Rowe era.
Right.
That was his first season, 2016-17, right?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they obviously didn't finish strong, but we'll get to that. We've got women's basketball as well, and you spoke to Kamiah Smalls, and we'll get to that sort of in the middle of the podcast, but I know you had a heck of a conversation with her.
Yeah, we kind of buried the lead on that one. This whole kind of podcast is centered around Kamiah and talking with her about her journey over there in Italy, her journey in the WNBA with the Indiana Fever, and it was just a great conversation overall, so that's going to be coming up in just a couple of minutes, so be sure to tune in for that. But we're going to start today's podcast off talking about women's basketball. The perfect pandemic team is what Bennett calls them. And they showcased kind of yet again why he says that over the weekend. Or not weekend, what day is it? It's Thursday. Over the weird Northeastern.
Monday, Tuesday, yeah. Got a little minor postponement. Someone at Northeastern had an illness unrelated to COVID, but they were super cautious about it, so waited and then came to Harrisonburg on Monday, Tuesday, and the CAA decided to announce that the games were rescheduled. Basically asked the game was being played.
Didn't they release it at like 1:30 and the game was tipping at 3?
Yeah, it was like a 12:30 release or something, a 3:00 game, like whatever. But
I feel bad for TJ Eck and Shane and everyone, like all the beat reporters.
Shane at least was in the loop, so like he knew it was happening for a couple days. I think TJ too, but like to not announce it to anyone else was kind of hilarious. So it's kind of nonsense there.
Thing in the world.
It's incredibly CAA to just not inform people your teams are playing. I mean, good God. I guess it doesn't matter. But they split with Northeastern, won the first game by 18, lost the second one by 8, which is similar to what they did against Elon in terms of winning the first and then losing the second. So they've also got the one win over Towson. They're 3-2 in conference play with a couple of splits. I mean, I don't really see them winning the conference. Like, I think they're really young and they've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think we were texting about this. I see this team, they're not going to win the regular season. I don't think so, just because they I think we're going to see a lot more splits as this season goes on. College of Charleston's up next, and William & Mary very well could be 2-2 after those 4 games in conference play, so moving to 5-4. So I think they're going to hover around that 500 conference mark for the rest of the season. But I believe you don't have this faith, but I believe this team, not that they will, but they have the ability to make a tournament run. They don't play great defense because they're so young, and defense is kind of something that you more have to learn just through experience and mistakes and time in a system. But offensively, they're gifted. They're led by a fantastic player in Kiki Jefferson, a couple solid 2 and 3 options. The problem with this team is when you get to the bench. This team is just not a lot of upperclassmen like strength to it. No offense to them. Like just overall, this team is just so dependent on their first starting 5 and the underclassmen that once you start to get into a little bit of like bench rotation, I mean, the Power Rangers are great and they've shown great flashes, but overall, like you can't rely on like a platoon swap every game to give you meaningful 10 minutes. Like, but that's why I say they're not going to win the regular season. They have a chance at making a run in the tournament, though, in the CAA tournament, because you just have to put together, 3 or 4 good games. And I think they're capable, and I think offensively they could kind of have a good output for a couple of games, and Kiki could take over. That's a possibility, not like my stamp of it's going to happen. More likely than not, they'll probably like fall in the quarters or semis.
Yeah, I don't know, because we don't have as frequent updates with some of the player stuff. I don't think Tinsley's played the last couple games. He's pretty much abandoned Power Rangers. Like Maddie Green started the 2 games against Northeastern. Like my issue is like they've got some really good players and good offense. There's just so many stretches consistently game to game where they just don't play good defense. And that's my thing is like you look at a team that's going to have a chance to win a conference tournament. To win 3 games in 3 days, you're probably one of those games going to be a bad shooting game. And I don't think they're good enough to get over a bad shooting game. So they could definitely string together 3 good offensive performances, but they need to get so much better defensively to really have any chance. Like even rebounding wise, they're not dominant. In years past, they would kind of dominate. They just haven't necessarily done that. So I think they're struggling a little bit defensively for a variety of reasons. And some of it, like you said, they're just super young. So I think they're going to take time to get better, which is, understandable, but they're not quite where they need to be right now. But I think they've got a chance to eventually get to a good spot. They're just, not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'd love to see the advanced stats on this team. Like I would love to because I know like the team has like their own advanced stats, but it's not really made public like in the men's game it is. I would love to see the advanced stats on like the fall off of defense and how much it really is. Like the eye test tells you like this team is not what we're used to when it comes to a JMU defensive team. But I would just love to see the advanced stats of like where it's happening.
Yeah, it's been a little disappointing. They also still have a major turnover issue. And some of that I think too is being young, but like they'll drive into the lane without really any idea what's going to happen. And they'll just sort of throw the ball away or commit a charge or something. And I think when you've got so many mistakes kind of on both ends right now, just because they need to grow more, I don't know if, by the time early March basically runs around, I don't know if they're going to be ready because it's only like a month away. I don't know if they're necessarily ready for that, especially assuming, right? You got to also assume that they don't have a pause. I mean, if you have another pause too, that makes it even harder. So it's just challenging with COVID and stuff, and they're lacking some of that. You mentioned they kind of lack a little bit of depth in terms of there's a drop off when they go away from the starting 5. So fingers crossed they can get there. They're still a good team. Like they're definitely a top half of the CAA team. I just don't like Delaware looks unbelievable. They've got 3. I think their top 3 leading scorers I was looking at are all at least redshirt juniors. And I think some of them were transfers. So I don't know how long they've necessarily played together. But it's like you look at JMU, you've got Kiki's a sophomore. Hazel's a freshman. Steph Oderkirk's a freshman. Like they're just really, really, really young. I think Rain Tucker is also a sophomore, right? So you've got just a lack of, veteran scorers, which I think makes it challenging to win.
Yeah, and to your point, they average 17.7 turnovers a game. You're not winning tough defensive battles when you're turning it over nearly 18 times a game. But yeah, right. Delaware's on another level. I think they're 11-1, undefeated in conference play. I think JMU is a top 3rd team. I think they're the 3rd best team in the CAA. Yeah, I just said a lot in that little piece. So let's move on. Anything else you need to add on women's basketball?
I think that's pretty much it. They are going to play this weekend against the College of Charleston. At least they're scheduled to. We'll get to the men, obviously, after the Kamiah interview, but the men are not scheduled to play this weekend.
Yes. So games coming up, College of Charleston this weekend and the following weekend, William and Mary. And after this ad break, we are going to talk to JMU women's basketball, JMU overall basketball star, Kamiah Smalls, about her journey post JMU and kind of what she's seen out of the women's basketball team up to this point as well. One of the best to grace the hardwood at the Convocation Center, Kamiah Smalls etched her name in the JMU women's basketball history books during her 4 years in Harrisonburg. Smalls went down as a premier all-around player. She's top 5 all-time in career points per game and total points and countless other categories. She finished her JMU career averaging 14.5 points, 2.4 assists, and 5.3 rebounds per game. After her career was cut short at JMU due to the pandemic, Smalls was drafted to the Indiana Fever in the WNBA draft. She was waived prior to the season and signed with USE Basket Rosascati, an Italian basketball team in the A1 League based in Empoli, Italy. According to Eurobasket.com, she currently leads the team in points with 18.7 per game, and she grabs 5.6 rebounds and dishes out 2.5 assists. Smalls was brought back to the Fever midway through the WNBA Wubble season, where she played in 7 games, highlighted by her debut performance where she went 4 for 4 from the floor and scored 13 points with 2 assists and 4 rebounds. Here's our conversation. Thank you so much for that, Bennett and or Jack, whoever threw to us, since we're recording not live. But we are joined by, we'd argue, one of the best women's basketball players, probably one of the best JMU overall basketball players to touch the Convocation court, Kamiah Smalls. How are you doing today, Kamiah?
Thank you so much for having me, Jack. I really appreciate it, and I'm good, living, making it.
Yeah. How's your last, what is it now, 11 months been through the pandemic? How's it been?
It's been up and down, as I'm sure you know. I've been in a couple different places, currently in Italy. So it's been good. I'm doing my best just to stay up, hoping to keep pushing through this. I haven't had any cases of COVID yet, so that's a blessing, just pushing up.
Yeah. So the last time JMU Nation probably was fully aware of what Kamiah was doing on the court was at the end of the CAA season last year, when the season got ended prematurely. You guys had a great team, looked like things were going to be going your way in the CAA tournament. What was kind of that just initial feeling when you got or how did you get the word that the season was over?
This is actually one of those days I'll never forget,
Yeah.
It was very much heartbreaking our whole team felt it, but I think our seniors is who it really hit the hardest, We were actually getting ready to play a game. We were still in our hotel. Our game was maybe, I would say, about 5 hours away. And we get a call from our Dobo, Bree Skeens, telling us that we have a meeting. And by now, we were waiting to watch other games that were before us. And we noticed that, on the virtual, on the TV, that the live stream just went off. It wasn't. So we're thinking our computer's messed up. Oh my God. We get down there. Coach O tells us that they're canceling the season. A lot of tears in that room, It was heartbreaking because, like you said, we were about to win a championship. And it was just frustrating, very, very flow. It's uncontrollable. Can't harp on it too much.
Yeah. Bennett and I talked at nauseum when that happened about just kind of the potential you guys had. ESPN released something that kind of was these are the dark horses that would have kind of had a run. And I think they projected you guys to even make it to the Sweet 16. What did you feel out of that team? If you guys had made it to the NCAA tournament, you had played Maryland extremely well earlier in the season. You guys were playing with the big dogs that year. What did you guys expect? What was the ceiling in your mind? I mean, of course it's a championship, but what was that ceiling?
To me, I felt like we could do anything at that point. Yeah. Like you said, we should have won the Maryland game. I'll say that 100 times. And after that game and after that loss, I think that's when we really started to excel. I think that we learned a lot from that game. And I think that if we had that chance to go to that tournament, I think ESPN projected that we could have went to the Sweet 16. I wouldn't say easily, but, coming in as that underdog, a lot of people don't think highly of us. And I think we were ready to shock the world in a lot of ways. So Yeah, it's very sad, but got to get over it.
Yeah, sorry I had to bring that up. Of course, had to talk about that team. But now we'll move on to the happier things of it all. After the season was canceled, things are going on in the world, and WNBA calls. You get drafted by the Fever, I think, round 3, pick 28, something like that. You go to train. You get drafted. You go to preseason camp with them. You end up in Italy for a bit, and then the wobble happens, and you get called back by the Fever to play in the wobble. First game, you just go out of your mind. What was that wobble experience like?
It was the most overwhelming yet prepared feeling I've ever had in my life. I got drafted on my 22nd birthday. Damn. I ended up getting waived maybe about 2 months later due to the fact that we didn't have any training camps. Mm-hmm. And when I got that call back, the only thing I was thinking was that if I would have stopped after being waived, that debut could have went totally different, I stayed ready for that moment. So I think that it was just going from watching them on TV 3 days ago to actually being in that atmosphere is what really got me going, I'm the energy, I'm the upbeat. I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to give my best. I'm not trying to outshine anybody. I'm not trying to get mine. I'm just trying to fill in where it's needed to be filled in. And I think I did a perfect job of that in that debut, which is why those points just came so easy. I was open. I shot the ball. I shot it pretty well. And I think that it really set a tone for me,
Were you starstruck at all? Because that first game was Chicago, right?
Yes.
So you're playing like Allie Quigley, like just huge. And then, just throughout the season, you played the Phoenix Mercury, right?
Yeah.
You played, Diana Taurasi, they have Diggins. Yes. Like, just the names you played. Like, I was going through it earlier today. And the names you played, you had to have been starstruck at some point during that. Like, these are, like, all-time athletes.
I was struck as soon as I stepped foot inside that gate. I was actually, my very first day there, I'm on my way to stay in my little, we call them lodges. And Candace Parker hops on my cart, Jack. And now I can't act like I'm like, oh my God, it's Candace Parker. Like, I'm here with her. Like, I'm here to compete against her. So I played it cool. But in my mind, I was like, oh my God, Candace. Like, I wanted to give her the biggest hug in the world. But I played it cool, It was good, though. It was great. I actually got to guard Diana Taurasi. And just for the record, she did not score on me.
Okay. All right.
I got to guard her, and it was just like one of the craziest feelings in the world. I'm like, wow, this is somebody I've been looking up to since I was 10 years old, and I'm going up against her now. It was like a dream come true, seriously. Dream come true.
Was it easy to guard her?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I went from Diana to Sky. Oh, Sky definitely. She taught me how to use a pick and roll very well, Jack. Very well. Nobody. I don't think I came in contact with anybody that I could say was easy to guard.
Yeah. Where was I going with that one? Oh, in the wobble. Just what's that like? Like, just that experience. You're completely, like, we heard about it a lot with the bubble, and like so many people were kind of saying how like mental health was a big issue in there. Like, you're just completely locked off. What was the wobble kind of like mentally like?
I was there for a short period of time, maybe like 2.5 weeks. But even for me in those 2.5 weeks, it was like isolated, like mind games, kind of. Like, it was like you have to find different things to do with, like, you're with your teammates, but like you miss your people at home. It was like once your game is done, then you're sitting here thinking about the fact that you're about to play another game in a day and a half. It was very exhausting. So I can only imagine the people that were there for those 2-3 months, how they felt in that long period of time. In my short period of time, I low-key was struggling a little bit, but we pushed through. I'm proud of everybody that was there and got through that. That was a rough experience.
Yeah. Have you kept in contact with the Fever at all? Do you know if you'll be back for next season, if you'll get a look in if there is a training camp, kind of what the plan is moving forward with the WNBA and the Fever?
I have been in contact with the Fever. We talk pretty often. I'm hoping to go back to training camps. You know, I'm a free agent right now, so I'm working through a couple different things. By February 1st, we should know the team that I'll land on. So hopefully I still get a chance. Hopefully, you know, if the Fever want me back, I'm hoping that I can make that happen, you know, explore options, different things. So we're going to have our fingers crossed, Jack.
All right, we'll keep them crossed over here too. We'll be refreshing the Twitter feed on February 1st, waiting for your announcement on Twitter or whatever team announces it. Moving from the WNBA back to JMU, we've seen kind of, I think Bennett and I both have been kind of, I think spoiled's the right way to put it. I mean, we went from Precious Hall and Jasmine to you, and now Kiki is just tearing up the court. And it's kind of been like this. Like, the teams have been great, but there's always been kind of like the number one on the team, like the go-to scorer, kind of just the bucket getter. What was that? Like, was there like a torch pass? And that's such a weird way of putting it, but like from Precious to you to Kiki, there's always been that one. Was there ever like, did Precious ever pull you aside, like as she was leaving, was just like, this is your team now, like go and get it? Or was it just kind of like an unspoken, like you guys knew that what it was going to be like?
I think it was unspoken, but it was prepared through the whole year, you know. That last year with Precious taught me a lot. You know, it was her 5th year, my 1st year. And she went out there and she did it, you know. She had that dog mentality, we like to say. That's one of the things that goes around JMU a lot in our program, you know, that dog mentality. She put down a stern foot for what it means to hold like that key to success. So watching that, I think that it just grows in like the next person, you know, the next person that comes in there ready to step into those shoes to go up against whatever it is we're going up against. And I think the same thing happened with me and Kiki. I've known Kiki for a while now. You know, she's from Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania. We were on the same AAU team growing up. Obviously, she was on a younger team. I was on an older team. And it's always been a connection there with me and her. So as I was leaving, you know, we talk on multiple occasions still to this day, just about the things that it takes to, you know, be successful and to keep growing the program and to make sure that those traditions stay alive, you know. It was good to see them pick first in the CAA preseason rankings. So I let her know all the time, like, listen, you got some big shoes to fill. You got to make sure you keep your team up to par. Make sure, you know, you motivate your young ones. Yeah, you're considered an underclassman, but you're a leader of that pack. So it's a role that you take on very early. I think I had to do the same thing my sophomore year, you know, step into a big role. But when you're up for the challenge, you're up for the challenge.
I didn't even put that together, that Kiki got into that role her sophomore year, you got into it your sophomore year. I forgot that you were a sophomore when you kind of was the number one. This team, now that I'm talking it out, is very similar to the last like crop, how you all came up kind of as sophomores and took over that team. Bennett keeps calling this women's basketball team this season the perfect pandemic team, just because they're going to get that extra year of eligibility if they want it. And it's kind of, I wouldn't say a wash of a year because they're still going out and competing every night, but it's kind of like they're so young that they can just perfectly grow together. And like, if they all decide to stay, that 5th year is just going to be crazy. And
it's going to be good.
Yeah. What have you seen out of them this season? Like you said, you watched every game. There's been some growing pains as this season's gone on, but there's also been some shining moments. I think the Buffalo game was probably a very good indication of how great this team can be, while also showing some of the growing pains. But what have you kind of just seen out of them so far this year?
The first thing I've seen, the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask me that, is the heart that team has. You know, they're young, but they don't look afraid of anything. You know, they go out there, they give their all on a night-to-night basis. I think that, like you said, it's growing pains. You know, they're young. You have to learn the game. They're going up against people. Example for Buffalo, I can't remember her name, but their leading scorer, like you could just tell she was more experienced in the game than JMU was. But they don't stop fighting. I haven't seen I haven't seen them give up yet. And I think that that's the biggest thing that that'll get them to that next level, you know. And the chemistry, like you said, if they all decide to stay through that 5th year, the chemistry is going to be through the roof by that point. So it's good. It's good. They got some things to do, but it's still good.
What's it – because the CAA is playing that weird back-to-back schedule because of the pandemic. What is that like? Like, can you kind of just – because my experience of playing basketball is at UREC during intramurals and getting technical fouls because I slammed the ball on the ground. So I can't really speak too much to what the body feels like as you're going through back-to-back games playing at Division I high level. What is that? Like, do you feel that after game 2?
Jack, I can't even tell you how I would feel if I had to do that, you know. I feel bad for them kind of because if you're giving your all on that first night to turn around, to have to rewatch that game the next morning, a lot goes into, you know, preparation for a game. So to have to do that within 16 hours of another game is kind of insane. So honestly, I give all the praise in the world to them for that. That's a struggle, seriously. I hope they have a lot of ice because they're going to need it.
Do you think that benefits the winning team or the losing team more, like that quick turnaround? Or neither?
I can't even tell you because if both teams are giving their all, your body's aching. Win or lose, your body's hurting the next day. So I mean, it comes down to your mental space at that point. It comes down to which team is stronger mentally, you know. There's no upper hand in that situation. There's no upper hand in that situation.
So back to your time at JMU, kind of what was your favorite memory of that team? We moved from the past torching to current day. Let's rewind it a bit and talk about your time at JMU. What was, just starting it off, favorite memory on the court?
My senior year we're talking about here.
Okay. Any year.
Well, because I always throw it back to the Virginia Tech game. You know, that game is a prime example of what JMU basketball is. It's just amazing. Like the atmosphere to start with, the heart that we showed that game, going down, you know, to the last minute with that Virginia Tech team, being Kenny Brooks on his stomping grounds, like that game right there defines what JMU women's basketball is. But I give a lot of credit to our seniors that year too for that one. You know, Ania and Logan, they wanted that very bad. Even Kayla Cooper-Williams, you know, she was a part of that Kenny Brooks era, and you know they just wanted to beat them, and we went out there and we gave our all, especially for them. That was a great year for us. So it was very exciting. That game is definitely top 1 on my list.
Prevail over the Hokies of Virginia Tech.
What was that the season? That was WNIT your sophomore year, right?
Junior year.
Okay.
When we made it to the Final Four.
Was that the year who'd you all fall to at the end?
Northwestern at home.
That was the Northwest. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you had the WNIT run. I think it was. So that was the same year. I'm getting all the years combined.
Sorry. Listen, I got to figure it out only because the memories just don't fade.
So then there was the year where you guys were decimated by injury in the CAA tournament. Like just like you blink and all of a sudden I think you were hurt, Lexi was hurt, and then I think Madison Green was hurt. It was just – I don't think I've ever seen a team hurt by injury that much. But then you guys went into the WNIT and had a little run then. Was that kind of like fulfilling?
That was junior,
okay.
Where we were the number 1 seed and we were going to win a championship that year as well too.
Oh, yeah.
I broke my hand last regular season game. Then our second leading scorer, Lexi Barrett, turns around, breaks her hand 8 seconds into the first round of the tournament. We end up losing to the number 9 seed, Hofstra, and we go into the WNIT and we end up going to the Final Four.
So I have a feeling you're going to say you should have played in the WNIT, but with that broken hand, like, did you play through a lot of pain with that? Like, should you have been playing out there?
Yeah, I should have been playing.
Okay.
I should have been playing. It came down to a lot of things for me. And it's actually crazy because before we even started preseason that year, I told Coach O, like, Coach O, I don't think that I want to play in this preseason. Like, I want my hand to be fully okay for us to be okay for next year. As time went on, like, my healing process was just moving. And I found out that we could get Virginia Tech at home if we made it to a certain round. I had to. It was like in my heart, I knew that I could trust my trainers. And at the time, Jess was our trainer, and she was telling me that my hand looks good. If I'm feeling good about it and I'm confident in what I can do, go out there and do it. So I did it. I took my first shot against USF back from the hand injury. I made the three, and it was all she wrote from there.
What would have happened if you missed that three, though? Would you have been like, man, this hand, I don't know?
Nah, we don't make excuses. I would came back down and try to shoot a layup.
We had a while back, we had Brian Shore on, and he was talking about how after he broke his collarbone, how, like, the trainers right before he went out, they were just like, don't get hit. And he was like, well, what happens if I get hit? And they were like, just don't get hit. So I was wondering if it was kind of the same thing with the hand, but I guess I won't throw the football trainers under the bus, but I guess basketball trainers kind of had it probably wrapped a little bit tighter than they had Brian Shore's collarbone.
If getting hit was a concern for Jess, I promise she would not have let me play that game.
So that core that was with Logan Reynolds and everything, and you brought up just kind of her impact and Ania Young's impact and Kayla Cooper-Williams. What was it like playing with Logan Reynolds? People kind of described her as like this gritty, tough, almost like I don't know the best way to describe her game style, but she'd always just be around the ball and forcing turnovers and just like that. What was that like?
The perfect point guard. I can't and that's the best way I can put it. Logan was the perfect point guard. Logan got you the ball in the spot you needed the ball in wherever, you know. You always had to prepare yourself for when Logan was going to pass you the ball. It was kind of like a Steve Nash in women's basketball, you know, like you need to be ready for the pass. And the one thing that used to frustrate us about Logan was that she wouldn't shoot the ball when she was open. And we're like, Logan, shoot the ball. She's like, nah, I want the assist. And she ended up having in the nation, I think at one point she was ranked like second in the nation for assist to turnover ratio. Logan was, and she was the point guard that kept you level headed. She was a great leader for us. An unsung hero kind of, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I'd be calling games with Kurt on Madison, and she'd get it just wide open at the top of the key and just would grab it. No one would run out to her because I guess in the scouting report it says Logan doesn't shoot. And then she'd just like pass it off, and it would always be the perfect pass. And we'd always just kind of sit there and be like, we were like, we can't be mad because it ended in 2 points or it ended in 3 points, but at the same time, like, shoot the ball. But I'm glad you guys were thinking the same thing. Did you ever stat watch? Because I know a lot of players talk about how they never stat watch. Like, did you, like, when you were having like great seasons, did you ever kind of like peek at stats and be like, well, what do I need to do to get into like the top 10 JMU all times? Or like, where do I stack up among the nation? Like, what do I need to do this game to like move up? Was there ever that, or was it just go out there and play your game?
No, I'm not even, no, not even close for me. For me, it all comes down to winning. I mean, I want to be at my best performance-wise, but to say that I sat there and just searched my stats, that's not the kind of person I am, you know. It came down to a lot of times where my teammates and Coach O would be mad at me because I wasn't shooting the ball enough. I'm like, nah, I like to pass too, you know. Like, I could score, but like I like to, you know, run up some assists. I can say though that the one stat that I always tried to focus on was my turnovers, which I guess is like not as good as watching your shooting percentage, I guess, but I hated turning the ball over. I was like obsessed with it for like my last 2 seasons. And they were like, this isn't the stat you're supposed to be watching. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to turn the ball over.
What do you remember what your turnover numbers were those last 2 seasons? Do you still remember it? That'd be something if you still remember.
I averaged at least 2 I want to say 5 turnovers a game, and I still hate myself for it.
That's such a low number, though.
But then Coach O would try to make me feel better by saying, you have the ball in your hands so much, you're going to turn it over. It's okay. I'm like, no, it's not okay. It's not okay.
And kind of last question then to wrap it all up after we trying to get on to a happier note after the 2.5 turnovers, which is a great mark. CAA play, you ran into Elon a couple of times, and then I think it was it Drexel that always seemed to be the number 2 in the CAA?
Yeah.
What was playing in the CAA like? Just like from a play perspective, because as fans, we're sitting home watching it, and it seems like a gritty league, especially on the women's side. What is just playing in the CAA and playing a full conference slate? Like at the end of it, when you guys are number 1 or number 2, like what is that feeling?
You said it. The perfect word I would say is gritty. You know, we're competitive, especially those top teams. I'll even give it to the lower teams. You know, they compete. They could be the bottom, but they're going to compete with you on a night-to-night basis. And CAA play, it's like whoever shows up that night could come away with the win. You know, so when it comes down to it, I would personally say that the CAA is one of the most competitive leagues there is, you know. We give our all. Every single team gives their all. You got your shining players, you know, you got your glue players, your defensive players, and everybody does what they need to do. So it all comes down to who shows up that night, and it's a fair shake throughout the CAA every year.
Yeah, it's always fun watching the schedule, and we'll be projecting, like, we'll be on the podcast and be like, okay, so JMU should win this game, this game, and this game. And then we're just kind of like, but we wouldn't be surprised if, like, they split these. And it's kind of that way across the board, too. Like, every single sport, like, I don't know if it's because it's a Northeastern, like done. So, like, it recruits so many Northeastern kids. Like, it is a gritty league across the board.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Kamiah. I'm really glad I was able to ask you some questions that I've always thought but never had an athlete at your level that I could ask. We wish you the best of luck this season. When does your season start?
We already started. We're in the mix. We're close to done right now, to be honest.
I should have researched that a little harder. Jeez. How's your team doing?
We're good. We're sitting in, like, the middle of the pack right now. We're about, I would say, 5 or 6 in the standings. So top 8 goes to playoffs. So we're in a pretty good position right now. Working hard, you know, staying consistent, trying to stay consistent as possible.
What's the team name so anyone in JMU, if they're up at weird times of the day, can watch you play in Italy? If there's any, somehow find a way of a stream or something like that. I don't know, maybe.
Uzi Basket Rosa is based in Empoli, Italy. So we're in the A1 league, top league in Italy. We're competing with some pretty good teams out here too. Much more physical game than in the States, so it's tough over here.
So it's preparing you for February 1st when you come back for the WNBA season with whoever it is.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kamiah. Good luck in the playoffs.
Thank you so much, Jack, and go Dukes as always.
A great conversation with Kamiah Smalls. It's one that I enjoyed listening to. Was not able to attend because I had the very important job of asking ACC men's basketball coaches whether they preferred suits or casual attire during that time. So I missed out on that, but it was a heck of an interview. It was cool because it covered so many things. You talked about, you know, the WNBA bubble and that experience, but also her time at JMU. And the part that stood out to me maybe the most is when you were talking about some of those previous years and you were trying to sort of rack your brain for, you know, what year was this? When did this all happen? And she was like, this happened on this day, when like it was still so vivid to her because of how much those memories meant to her.
It was crazy. I also tried to figure out with her hand injury when she broke her hand, that NIT run. Because I remember we talked to Brian Shore and I brought it up in the interview. We talked to Shore and he was like, I should not have been playing with my broken collarbone. Like, and that was kind of like, oh, wow. Like that was an intense run then you did. And I was hoping she'd be like, I probably shouldn't have been playing, but I just had to do it for the love of the game. But she was like, no, I was good to go. And of course she nails the 3 against USF to come back from that injury, which was crazy. That was an injury, just crazy injury game, injury season. But that was a great conversation. And in Italy, This is where I fell short on this, and I think Bennett would have come in clutch with it. I didn't do my full research with her Italian career, but she's balling over there in Italy. Her team's right now around the 6th spot, which she's going to make the playoffs, and then there'll be a postseason run over there in Italy. And then we're going to know on February 1st where and if Kamiah is making a return back to the WNBA since her contract is up with the Indiana Fever.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And like you mentioned, the Italian career seems to be going well, and that's sort of not a surprise for a lot of WNBA caliber players where they play the WNBA season and then sometimes go overseas too. And it's actually got a chance to be pretty lucrative. So for her to have some success there and play really well and then also have opportunities at the WNBA is really cool, because I think they're getting closer to maybe having more players good enough to eventually get into the WNBA on a consistent level. I think Kamiah maybe can be a start for that.
Yeah, and in WNBA news, I don't know if you saw, but I believe Chelsea Gray and Candace Parker both left the LA Sparks, which is kind of huge. But we won't get too much into WNBA news. We'll jump over to men's basketball now, and they are coming off a 1-1 split with Northeastern and a big-time win over Towson, who had Zane Martin back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, Towson's so bad. Like, I mean, you want to be nice, but, like, Towson's really not great. So for them to sweep Towson is exciting. Towson's only wins this year. They've got a win over Coppin State, and then they actually swept UNCW, somewhat surprisingly. But they've struggled this year. So that one was good for them to follow up the Northeastern win. That's the one that really has me excited. Like, to go into Northeastern. I mean, this is the first time Northeastern's lost in that specific venue where they almost never play since 2005, Jack. They're playing in an arena they used to play
there probably since 2004. So
it was like the 05 season. I think they do like occasional stuff where sometimes, because they're more of a hockey school and they share the hockey arena typically and play basketball. And then the women's team plays in the Cabot Center. And that's also where they play volleyball. And that's where they were able to play this year. And yeah, they mentioned it on the broadcast. They're like, first home loss since 2005 at this place. So I think they didn't even mention the ad on the broadcast, though. They made it seem like Northeastern had not lost a home basketball game in over a decade, which is very much not true.
They probably those were probably the best non-JMU announcers. I mean, we're also a little biased with saying that we prefer the JMU announcers, but I think those were probably the best announcers we've had for an away game so far this season. But they probably just didn't read the full note, and they're like, first home loss? Whoa, we got to mention this on the broadcast. That was one of the ones where you're flipping through the game notes at about the 4-minute mark left in the second half, and you're like, what's crazy about it? And then you just see that stat, and you're like, boom, there it is, done.
Yeah, they were good. They were with Nesson or whatever up there in the Boston area, which made it a lot better. You don't have, like, the Towson announcer who's crying, literally tears every time Matt Lewis made a shot. Yeah, but I'm excited about this team for them to be able to split against Northeastern, which is still, in my opinion, the best team in the conference. Yeah, it's the first loss. Northeastern was 7-0 in the conference going into that game, and then they followed it up with a blowout win over a bad Towson team. But they're doing a good job. They're on the fringe of the top 200 in Ken Palm. They're at 201 as of when we're recording this, and they actually just moved into the top 150 at number 150 in the net ranking. So they're becoming a lot less embarrassing.
This is probably the first time in this is the first time in net ranking history JMU has cracked the top 150.
Yeah, I don't think they were there last year. They were not all that good. It's just they're playing better basketball. Vado Morse dropped 30 in the win against Northeastern the day after he had 3 points and was 1 of 10. So kind of a huge change for him there. And he was really confident against Towson too. And they looked a lot better. Zach Jacobs gave some contributions because Amadi had a couple early fouls. Matt Lewis was doing Matt Lewis things. He's been pretty good all year. I don't know. I think there's some reason to be excited.
Which game do you want to jump into first and just kind of break down? Northeastern series or the Towson game?
Let's do we can do Northeastern series. We'll go chronologically, I suppose.
Okay, perfect. I also don't know how much weight that Towson game carries. I mean, I guess we can talk a little bit about St. Martin, but yeah. The Northeastern.
He also got tossed with like 10 minutes left.
Yeah. That first game though, I want you to start, and then that way I know what to talk about, because I'm really torn on this Northeastern, like that split. Like, you're very hype about it. I don't think I'm as much excited about it as you are. I think I'm more cynical. I'm a little jaded. I texted you that after the game.
Defensively, they're not good. Like, I don't think JMU's any good defensively. So I have a lot of doubts, like, about this team long term and what it can actually do. But here's the one take that I have from that weekend and maybe the Towson game too. Louis Rowe came to JMU without ever coaching a game as a head coach. He had never been a head coach. So he had been an assistant for about a decade, and that includes like 3 years as a graduate assistant at JMU. So he had, I think in terms of assistant coaching, like full-time assistant coaching, not a grad assistant, I think he had like 7-ish years, maybe 8. Mark Byington has been a head coach for like, I forget the exact number of years, but it was like 6 or 7 years, I think. Let me pull it up. 6 or 7 years at, Georgia Southern?
Yeah.
And Georgia Southern. So he had, 7 years. He was an intern at the College of Charleston in 2011, 2012 before they moved into the CAA. They were in the Southern Conference. But my thing is, like, his first year at Georgia Southern went 6-10 in the league, which was the Southern Conference. They ended up moving to the Sun Belt the following season. He's been at least a 500 conference team every single year the last 6 years. So the worst he had was 10-10. He's been above 500 the other 5 years. He's won at least 11 games in 5 of those last 6 years. Like, his teams have been good. He's won 20 games the last 3 seasons as a head coach. So for this team, like, this team's always been talented since Rowe came. Like, they've had a good roster. Matt Lewis is the best player in the league, and he's playing like his best player in the league. So you have a talented roster with a somewhat competent coach. Like, it's not surprising to me that they're better. I don't think they're going to win the league. I don't think they're the best team in the league this year. But I think there's a legitimate reason to be excited, and that's because I don't think Mark Byington came here. Like, he came here to make the NCAA tournament, which he's never done before. He didn't come here to be like a 30-year head coach at JMU. Like, I think Mark Byington is young enough that he has high major coaching aspirations, which is great news for JMU fans, because I think he's going to get them to a point where they're good enough to make the NCAA tournament and win the league, and then he's going to leave. But that's fine, because I think he's going to win. Like, I feel very confident in him as the head coach. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, it's kind of like VCU. I mean, Shaka Smart wasn't there to be a 30-year VCU head coach. He was there to move on. And, like, it's perfectly fine. I think JMU fans get this, like, idea in their head, and I love JMU too, but they get this idea in their head that JMU is this Walt Disney World that you want to go to and stay for the rest of your career. And Harrisonburg, Virginia is where you want to raise your kids and all of this stuff. And it doesn't matter about the money. All it matters is that you're winning and you make good money and you're in Harrisonburg. Like, and they just build it up. Like, I'm like, that was so big with Mike Houston. They're like, why would he want to leave? And it's like, well, because JMU is a stepping stone school, which is what you want to be. You're not going to be dishing out $2.3 million a year for a coach like Texas is with Shaka Smart, or like Kentucky is with Calipari. Like, you're dishing out, I think, $750 at the most a year, which is great money, but it's a stepping stone school. Mark Byington came here to win for a few years and move on. Mike Houston came here in football to take us to 2 national championships and then have an interesting 3rd season and move on. Curt Cignetti, he might be here for the long haul, because he's – who knows. But, I mean, if they had gone out and hired the Texas coach, who was like an old JMU alum who was really young, and he had good he has aspirations past JMU too. We're a stepping stone school, and it's okay. And that's what Byington is going to bring. And then the key is just hiring another good coach who can make this a stepping stone.
The issue before is, like, Rowe wasn't good enough to be like, they hired Matt Brady under the assumption that they're basically saying they wanted to get to NCAA tournaments, right? They wanted to win the league. Yeah. And they wanted to get to a point where they could be a stepping stone. They obviously would never say that, but that's kind of what the goal was. It was like, all right, let's get good enough so that we can be what the football team is, where they, compete to win conference titles. And then whatever that brings in terms of the postseason, obviously, is very different for the football team than it would be for the men's basketball team, at least now. If you're in the CAA, you're probably not winning national championships at that level.
I don't know.
Maybe one day. But, I mean, like, you've clearly got to continue to improve as a program, and that was sort of the thing, was like, all right, Brady has a stagnant, let's go and move on. And then they hired a guy who had never been a head coach and was an assistant on like historically losing programs. So it didn't make any sense. Now they've hired a guy who's like a successful head coach. So like, I'm very excited that they appear to be heading in a direction. Like, I think they have an idea of what they're doing defensively. They like move, like they have their hands up. They're not good, but they have their hands up and they're trying to get better.
Here's my favorite stat that I found. I figured out what it was just recently when I was writing the Northeastern game preview. Effective possession ratio. It is what you can use for a lot of March Madness upsets. It's a big time predictor in figuring out what upsets are going to occur, and it's the amount of shots you get per possession. And JMU offensively is around 0.93, and that's pretty solid. But defensively is where I want to look at this, because we talk about how bad they are defensively, but over their last 3 games, they're allowing just 0.863 shots per possession. Now, I'm going to break that down a little bit because there's more to it. Northeastern is one of the lower effective possession ratio teams in the country, averaging around 0.87, around that margin. So that's why they kind of dropped off. Against Towson, they allowed 0.963 shots per possession. So it's just getting a call in the middle of this fantastic monologue. So it's kind of, I think that's why it's 0.863. And that was just a side tangent to kind of rub it in Northeastern's face that they have a very lackluster offense, but a fantastic defense. But on the season, JMU's 95th in the country at 0.908 for opponents' effective possession ratio, which is not terrible. Like, this defense, I don't think is that bad. I think the problem is turnovers, not defense.
I think it's both, because like they do a nice
You're wrong,
job.
Bennett.
They do a nice job of like creating. Occasionally they can create some turnovers and do some things. They have, I would argue, the worst rim protection of any team like in college basketball.
Okay, they have
so
no
like,
post player, so I guess you have a point.
They don't have a 5. The other thing is like there's like defensively for me, like I think it's some of it too is like with the stat you're saying, that's basically how many shots you give up per possession. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that would factor in like turnovers. So if you force turnovers, you're going to be good at that metric, right?
So it's 0. It would be 0 if you force a turnover, right. And then it's also kind of factors in rebounds. Like if they get 3 shots because of 2 offensive rebounds on that. So I think I really love this stat, and I just figured it out. And it's kind of and it's why I thought JMU was going to win the first Northeastern game and then lose the second. I just got that mixed up.
The other thing that I guess worries me a little bit is they're not like a dominant rebounding team. So they also have that. But the other thing is like they give up a fairly decent amount. It's actually a little bit better than you might think. But the other concern I have is like when teams do get shots off, like a lot of those shots are open. Towson had a ton of open shots, and they just, they're the worst shooting team this season. Like they're one of the worst shooting teams in the country. Horrible. They're literally one of the worst 15 worst 3-point shooting teams in college basketball per KenPom. Like they just suck. So that's where I want to see the defense against like respectable teams. Because you even mentioned Northeastern's offense isn't really all that special. They're just a good defensive team.
So you cut out at you want like Northeastern's a bad offensive team too, so you want to see them play like a good offense.
Yes. And then my question for you is there a Colonial Athletic Association team that's actually any good at offense? Like, are they going to be tested defensively, or is this defense going to be good enough for them to win like 10 conference games?
No, people probably thought this podcast just cut out because that was such a long pause. There, like looking at it,
Hofstra's okay.
Who is a good offensive team in the CAA? Like
Looks like
JMU might be
Hofstra-
one of the better offensive teams.
Hofstra and Delaware both appear to be in the top 150 in KenPom. JMU is just outside it. So I guess there are two that I guess you would maybe look to for JMU at least.
And
You
they
know, what are
play
they gonna do
back-to-back
against-
weekends.
They've got Delaware in between, I think.
I thought you said
So they
Delaware
have-
and Hofstra are good offense.
No, sorry, Hofstra and Drexel.
Oh, okay.
And then Delaware appears to stink on both ends of the floor. Nobody in the league's really good, though.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. And okay, so what we saw against Northeastern, the reason their number is so low is because they're a very slow-paced, methodical offense. They're going to pass, take a shot, and then move on. Like, where JMU's a very up-tempo, like, Northeastern's one of the slowest teams in the nation. JMU's one of the faster teams in the nation. So that's also going to affect your effective possession ratio. So I think that's what it's going to come down to is when they play a good offense that's also a little faster tempo. Because, like, if they can get multiple possessions, if both teams are getting a lot of possessions, I think that's when you're going to see this defense truly tested. But I do think this defense is a little bit better than we give them credit for. I think the problem is when JMU turns it over a lot, when they turn it over more than 15 times, I bet they're probably don't have a win.
Yeah, they struggle a lot with turnovers, and when they can take care of the ball, they're pretty decent. But I mean, it's interesting because like Northeastern's slow, but they're also not efficient because like a lot of the metrics take account for like tempo, and they're still like not good offensively, but they seem to get shots pretty easily against JMU. Like there's no time where I really feel confident every time they've done it a couple times, but where I think JMU's like, you know what, I think they're going to hold them scoreless for 3 minutes. Like I've never thought that watching JMU this year. I've always been like, how many points do you think they're going to give up in the next 5 minutes? Because it might be 20.
There was a point in that Northeastern game where it was kind of like JMU and Northeastern, like JMU was up 5 or something like that. And I swear you just blinked and all of a sudden JMU was down like 15. And you were like, how did that happen?
Then they did it against Towson the other way where they were down 13-2 and they went on a 17-0 run. And it was just like in the blink of an eye. And I was like, good Lord. Because Matt Lewis and Vado Morse, when they get going, it seems like every shot they take is going to go in. So they've got some guys that can score. Their defense appears to be getting a little better, although they still need to – I guess I'm mostly sad because, like, can you imagine how interesting and potentially good they would be if they had been able to also convince Dwight Wilson to stay?
Okay, I was glad you brought this up. This team's good this season, and they're going to be a top half CAA team. I think we both can agree on that. They're going to win a game or two in the CAA tournament, maybe win it all. Who knows? I don't know.
I won't give them any guarantees until they do it. Matt Brady scarred me for that.
But I was thinking about this yesterday. If they had Darius, I mean, granted, you then kind of think, well, then who would not have transferred? Let's just, for this argument, let's just say Rashawn Fredericks, who already has left the program, didn't transfer here.
That's convenient.
And TJ Taylor, who's getting minuscule minutes, didn't transfer. And they kept Dwight and they kept Darius. I think this team is a top contender in the CAA.
Well, yeah, but they kept 2 first-team caliber players. Heck yeah, they'd be darn good. But I guess that's the sort of my Byington point is like they had those players last year and they sucked.
I was gonna say like
yeah.
I think also like, and I'm not trying to trash on teams of years past, but this is gonna come across as trashing on teams of year past. They had no defense for 4 years. Like Matt Lewis was not really told like you're doing this wrong on like at least it never looked like that. So like this whole team was behind the 8 ball when it comes to like how to play defense correctly. And so they're just learning. Not only are they learning, like especially Matt and Zach Jacobs, who were in the Rowe era, like not only now are they learning how to play defense, the team as a whole has to learn how to play defense, and the team as a whole has to learn Byington's scheme.
They're also I think it's probably not appreciated enough. Like Matt Lewis is significantly more efficient this year. Like he scores at the rim a lot better. He's shooting the ball pretty well. Like there were times in years past where he was still a really good player, but he's become like pretty clearly in my mind, like this kid is the best player in the conference.
He has shut me up 100%. Coming into the season and the past seasons, I'd always harp on he wasn't an effective shooter. He was like a Russell Westbrook where he's going to take 30 shots a game and he's going to have a poor percentage, but he's going to get his and he's going to get his points. Now Matt can take a game over. We've seen it on multiple occasions where they might be down 5 or they might be up 2 and it's kind of a close game, and then Matt just takes it over. He's one of the best guards in the country when it comes to shooting inside the 2-point arc. He's really improved his 3-point shooting. He's put together his entire game. He listened to what NBA scouts had to say, and he's showing that he is the best player in the CAA. He has shut me up 100% because he's going to take his shots. He's going to get his points, but most importantly, he's going to be an effective shooter and an effective offensive player.
Here's my question for you. This is basically my last point. There's one team in the conference per Ken Pom in CAA-only games that is in the top 2 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Who is it?
JMU.
It is JMU. So I think it makes sense. Our defensive points kind of go along the same thing. They lead the conference in turnover percentage created in conference play. They're 8th out of 10 teams in block percentage. They're 7th, so toward the bottom, in 2-point shooting percentage allowed. So they're not great necessarily defensively, but they create a ton of turnovers. A lot of that is, with taking charges or just forcing bad passes. Then also they're 3rd in steal percentage in conference games. So they're not necessarily the best defensive team, but they got a little Georgia Tech in it where they got some guards who can go out and steal the ball. So yeah. And then to also be in the top 2 in terms of, offensive efficiency, it's pretty darn impressive.
I think
darn impressive.
With that stat, the defensive portion doesn't impress me too much just because they've played a bad Northeastern offense and a terrible Towson offense.
Fair.
What impresses me is their offensive efficiency because they played the best CAA defense and they put up 79 in one of the games, 63 in the other. We won't talk about that one. But, I mean, it's impressive that with the defenses they've played, they're a top offensive efficiency team. Defense, we'll talk about that in a few weeks after they've played a couple more games and we have a better sample.
Do you know who the worst offensive team in conference-only games is?
Towson.
So far this season? And it's
Who is it?
It's Elon.
Oh.
They've only played Northeastern, and they got murdered in both. But that's who JMU plays next. So they're going up against another offense that is subpar. So you're right. We got to be a little patient here to see if the defense – what is the defense? But what I will say is, like, when they go up against some of these better offenses, those teams don't have the same defense as Northeastern. Like, if JMU plays a shootout, I kind of like their chances.
I do too. JMU is such a fast tempo team that shoots well enough that if they get in a sprint with Hofstra just running up and down the court, I love JMU's chances in that. Now, if they're in a defensive slugfest, give me the other team.
I think that's the thing that's interesting is, like, they can go on a 9-0 run very quickly. I think this year they kind of, at least to me watching, they have like a belief that they can do that. Whereas in years past, if they got down 13-2 to Towson, I think they might look over to the bench and they'd see like a moderately confused Lewis Rowe and kind of never really rally. And this year it seems like they call a timeout and they're like, all right, like, here's what we're going to do. Let's just do it. And then they just do it.
Yeah. Morris,
so
when he's on is a top tier CAA player. When he's off, I don't know. Not as much.
He's got a little streakiness to him.
He has. Granted, his last 2 games have been phenomenal, but he's kind of a liability defensively when his offense isn't scoring.
Yeah, he definitely seems like a player who's maybe a little more locked in overall when the shot's falling, where you're also going to get a couple steals from him. So I think as he continues to grow defensively, that'll be huge. But yeah, I'm interested to sort of see the rest of the season. They're scheduled to go now a week before playing against Elon, I think it is, or something. Or maybe I have that wrong. I thought it was right, but
They play February 3rd against Elon.
Okay, I was getting it all confused with because they keep the games on the schedule. It just says postponed in the corner.
There's also only one UNCW game scheduled.
Yeah, they had that one postponed too, so that's like a remake game on the 9th. So we'll see how all that stuff goes. But I like this team so far. I think they've got some pieces and some growth. And in future seasons, I think the main thing is like you got to get a 5. Hey, let's get a big guy who can actually play the 5.
Yeah, he's on the bench right now, just getting ready.
He's in a boot right now.
Really?
Yeah, Joel Mensa was in a boot. So,
damn.
According to Shane Metlin. So we will see what happens there. But
I mean, he's not gonna. They're just gonna play ultra small ball for the rest of this. He's not. I don't think he's gonna see time in.
Not this season. No, it'll definitely be an ultra small ball. But I would like it where Amadi does not have to finish his career at the 5.
Yes. Remember when Matt Lewis started his career as the 2?
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Combo guard. That's all I got.
Same here. I think this was a pretty good podcast, highlighted by Kamiah's interview. I think we had some really good advanced stats talking some effective possession ratio, my personal favorite stat, talking some offensive and defensive efficiency via KenPom. That's Bennett's favorite website. I think he loves on KenPom, just like putting in different things to figure it out. Do you want to do a quick hit on football?
I guess so.
All right, Bennett,
Do
you
you
ready
wanna
for
talk-
some now football takes?
Yes, I am ready for football takes because I have a bunch of takes stored up because a weird habit about me, I don't know if you know this. When I get bored, I just like find myself on the JMU roster page, like looking through position groups and like the weights and stuff. And I'm like, wow, these guys are fit.
That's
These
what
guys are going to be tough.
that was the downfall of the Colgate game, though. You did that on the Colgate's page, and you're like, man, these are some small kids. And then you watch the highlights, and you're like, damn, they suck. And then you just text me, they're like, we're going to blow them out by 50. And then it looked like that after the opening kickoff and that first drive. And then from there, it all just went to shit.
Yeah, I remember watching those and looking through, and I was like, man, the pound for pound advantage that they have. And then they're running this nonsensical, basically an option scheme out of the shotgun. And it got to us toward like the third quarter, man. We couldn't stop it for a couple of drives. And obviously, Benanucci, the wind and whatnot, he threw 5 interceptions out of his control completely. God, what a horrible game. If he doesn't throw 5 picks, obviously they win. So, in my defense,
in Danucci's let's not get down this rabbit hole. I guess it's another day.
We need to schedule Colgate and just get this out of our system. Like they need to bring Colgate to Harrisonburg or go there and just beat them by 40. And when they have just.
All right. What are your hot takes? We got to get this done quickly because you're breaking in and out on this Zoom.
Yes. Okay. My hot take is that Cole Johnson is basically an NFL quarterback, so I hope he's a starter.
What?
Dude, with his cannon, if you give him a spring and a fall, I think he gets drafted. Although the issue I have is he going to be able to beat out Gage Maloney? And then maybe more importantly, can he beat out Kyle Adams?
Or more importantly, are they just going to employ a running back at quarterback and run it 100 times out of a Wildcat? Because that is very much.
Oh my God. They had their like media session or whatever, the virtual CAA coaches. They were only on for 10 minutes, I think. But Cignetti in his 10 minutes was able to say that he likes the offensive line and he likes the running backs.
If that's not the most
very Cignetti,
you're not paying attention to JMU football enough. TJ Eck tweeted something out. He was like, "What's your expectation for the JMU offense?" And I quote tweeted, "It would run the ball 75 times a game." I don't think there will be a game this season where the quarterback passes for more than 25 times.
I mean, you look at Morehead State and Robert Morris; those are the 2 February games. I mean, do you think they'll throw it 10 times?
I think JMU will. I don't think so. Like when you have Percy, you have Jawan, you have Solomon Van Horst, you have Latrell Palmer, you have Austin Douglas, you have insert other name here. Like everyone,
probably like 3 walk-ons we don't even know.
Yeah, but every running back on this roster of the 4 or 5, I lost count, however I named, are starter caliber on any other FCS team.
Yeah, I mean, they've got just an absurd number of players, and that's what kind of scares me. If they go Gage Maloney, I literally don't think they will throw.
We would turn into like a triple op. We're going to have a fullback that's just going to be Latrell Palmer, and then we're going to have Percy and Jawan switch out at the halfback.
I wouldn't be surprised. It kind of takes us back to the Houston opening presser when people were like, sir, are you going to run a triple option? And he's like, no. And everyone's like, oh, thank God.
Honestly, give me the wishbone. Let's bring back Oklahoma football 1922. Let's line up in the wishbone. Let's do full house sets like in Madden, how we used to play that with the quarterback and then boom, boom, and then the halfback back. Let's go old school.
The best part is that he's not wrong. When he's like, oh, I like the offensive line, I like the running back. Like, realistically, those are probably the 2 best positions on the team.
Yes.
And then I think defensive line might be the 3rd.
And here's the thing. With a team that's as good running the ball as JMU in theory is going to be, it's going to make the defense so much better. Like, they're going to be rested. Like, there's a strong possibility that JMU can hold the ball each time they have an offensive possession. There's a strong possibility that they can run at least like 5 minutes of clock of like game time. And like that's probably like 20 minutes real time with a commercial break thrown in there and a few other things. The defense will never be tired. These are really huge predictions and they're going to bite me in the butt. But hey man,
we've got like 3 weeks 3 weeks until they play, it's very easy to like look at this roster and be like, we're going to hold the ball for 40 minutes. We're going to win 70-3. And it's going to be perfect. There's going to be no COVID issues. It's going to be perfect. Obviously, some things will occur, and I'm interested to see how the season actually goes, especially when they, all the potential COVID things that could go wrong. And the other thing I'm interested to see is like how far will some of these FCS teams go in terms of missing players in a game.
I'm not going to focus on the sad. I'm going to ask you a question instead and just completely gloss over what you just said. Over
John
under
Rothstein-esque, yes.
over under 50 points allowed in the first 2 weeks, like combined.
Oh, way under. You could cut that in half, and I might still take the under.
Jesus.
The first 2 weeks are Morehead State and Robert Morris are terrible.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is like in the
total
fourth,
points allowed.
Like I have a feeling we're gonna have 70 points midway through the third quarter, and then we're just going to.
I think they only gave up against like Morgan State last year. It was 12. Then they gave up, I think, 7 against another cupcake. So they only gave up 19 in those two. So I feel confident. Now, I think the defensive line is going to be great. I have some questions about linebacker and the secondary, but I would definitely take under 50. I might take under 40. I might take under 30. I might take under
7
30.
and 12 last year in the two cupcakes.
What do you think?
I think under 2, but I think it's a little bit closer.
Okay. I mean, the issue is some of it is like, how much are you letting Cole Johnson throw? Like, do you want NFL scouts to see him yet, or do you want to hold some of that back for the fall?
I hate you.
I'm serious, man. 6'5" with a cannon of an arm. I don't know.
How much does Carson Wentz sucking hurt FCS quarterback draft stock?
I don't think it matters too much. If you're a good, like Trey Lance, no one's going to care about Carson Wentz. Trey Lance is a stud. He's obviously no Cole Johnson, but he's a good player.
Okay, give me one more hot take. We're gonna wrap up this podcast. But just give me one more hot take.
Okay. Well, not a hot take, but I'm excited to see the teams. I still can't get over like March 6th at Elon, and it's not like a men's basketball game. Like it's the football team. This isn't, Odyssey Alexander trotting out into the circle March 6th at Elon. Like we got a March football season, man. It's gonna be so weird. I'm excited. They play Richmond twice in a 3-week span.
That's going to be JMU Nation might combust.
That's the dream. And then obviously we got Morehead State and Robert Moore. I'm a little frustrated. Actually, here's my hot take. It kind of a huge scheduling miss to not get Chawan. I don't know if they have a football team, but like, how are they not on this schedule?
What about Alice Lloyd? No, you know who we need to bring back? Lancaster Bible College. Let's remake that. Could you imagine an NAIA school coming in and playing JMU? God, that would be ugly.
I would like to see us play Bridgewater. Like, let's figure out. We know that like those are the two teams that run the state. So who runs it for real? Is it Bridgewater or is it JMU? Let's settle it on the field.
Let's have a season. This is the miss of the season. Not just running it back against every single Virginia school. ODU, UVA, Virginia Tech, but in a round-robin type of format so that the winner is a D3 school against JMU, and it's for bragging rights.
I think the CAA actually should try something similar to what they do with basketball, and this is more of a serious take. You know how they play like back-to-back Saturday, Sunday?
Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason that JMU, William, Mary, Elon, and Richmond can't all gather at Bridgeforth Stadium, and they just play each other one day. Boom, 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 boom. You play 3 or 4 games in one day. Your body's not going to feel it, right? Because the games are still going on.
So this isn't a serious take.
Why can JMU not complete its entire spring season in like a 9-hour day? That's my take.
That was a terrible take. And with that, we hope you guys enjoyed the podcast for today, the JMU Sports News Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, or wherever you are listening right now. Give us 5 stars if we are so deserving, and we believe we are. Go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter at JMU Sports News. We are on Facebook at www.facebook.com/JMU Sports News. Find us at our home on the web, jmusportsnews.com. If you have any ideas for a new name, please let us know. We got Duke Dog Alley. That one is in the hat. We will eventually pull when we have more name suggestions, and we're just going to close our eyes and pull out of a hat and see and just go from there. But thank you again to Kamiah Smalls for coming on this podcast and talking with us for about 30 minutes. That was a fantastic time. And I think that's all I have to say. Bennett, anything else you need to add?
No, that's it. We're coming into what I hope is a very exciting time where we'll have spring sports, football, and both basketball simultaneous at the end of February. So fingers crossed that they can actually do that COVID-wise, but gearing up to be a fun, exciting month or two.
Yeah, throwback to when there was no sports, and now every single sport might play on one day. I think we'll be having probably a football preview podcast coming up soon, because I did not realize that football season is 3 weeks away. So mark your calendars for that whenever that drops. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever day it is you're listening to this. For Bennett Conlon, my name is Jack Fitzpatrick. See ya.